Newcoin started as an AI project, newlife.ai. And so in 2019, we joined the NVIDIA accelerator and we built the first implementation of RLHF. So the way you do it, RLHF, reinforcement learning from human feedback, you plug a UI on top of a model and you collect nuanced human feedback to reinforce the model. And so the difference with static models where you just train it one time, here you create this dynamic feedback loop where the model keeps getting smarter as you use it. And so the more you use it, the smarter it gets. The smarter it gets, the more you want to use it. And so it creates this data flywheel effect. And so this human behavioral data for machine learning is not new. Netflix is not a movie theater anymore, it's a feedback history intelligence. Like people watch movies, they give feedback, and then it helps the next person to get better recommendations. Spotify, TikTok, Google, even Tesla, they are becoming a data company because they track how we behave, the reactions of the driver in the car. And so the difference here is that for the first time, we used it at the generative level. So it was not just about recommending content, but it was about generating content at the token level, at the pixel level. And so I strongly believe that what makes the difference between ChatGPT and Gemini is this time window where in 23, they had about 3-4 months where everyone was using ChatGPT, the UI. And as you use the interface, they can track your mouse, your behavior, your thumbs up, thumbs down, all those cues, and they have collected tons of feedback. And so I think the jump in intelligence from GPT 3.5 to GPT 4 is this 1 trillion parameters that were derived from human feedback. And so for us, it took us only 40,000 people to quickly realize the power of that thing. And by 21, we were like, okay, this thing is way too powerful to be just an app or just a company. It has to be an open source protocol. And this is how Newcoin was born.
In a Wikipedia page about the history of artificial intelligence, which of the GPTs would they put?
That is a good question. If I had to pick some moment from what we've seen so far, I'd sort of pick ChatGPT. It wasn't the underlying model that mattered, it was the usability of it, both the RLHF and the interface to it. And RLHF is how we take some human feedback and then feed that back into the model with reinforcement learning. And that process works remarkably well with, in my opinion, remarkably little data to make the model more useful.
You can't just crawl the internet because there's a lot of junk out there. A huge percentage of websites have more noise than signal.
No, it's very important to, on the internet you have mostly garbage. And it's very important to take this garbage and distill it very heavily so that you do get the things that are actually interesting for a model. And this is something that we've been pretty good at.
What is the most valuable source of data? Is it Reddit, Twitter, books? What would you trade many other tokens of other varieties for?
Generally speaking, you'd like tokens which are, speaking about smarter things, tokens which are more interesting.
Yeah.
So all the sources which you mentioned, they're valuable.
Okay, so maybe not Twitter, but
the amount of actual the lines of code is very small, and most of the work, the software work, is in the curation of the data. So it's like trying to figure out what data is separating good data from bad data.
New subnets, are you excited to release soon, or hoping that people will build soon that aren't there yet?
A fork of Scale AI would be really great. We want to collect human responses to queries, not just AI responses. The ability to kind of have a human in the loop on one of the subnets would be something that I will build, hopefully after I finish my current work. So that's an exciting one where it's you don't just mine with the computer, but you can mine with yourself, and we can plug ourselves into the system and work for BitTensor in a different way. Answering questions, doing RLHF, right? Collecting data sets for RLHF, labeling data sets, training and the variety of different mechanisms for training over a decentralized network. I think that's a really, really interesting problem.
This is exactly the point of a huge amount of the human feedback training that's actually happening with these LLMs today. This is huge.
The actual mechanism of doing the human RL with human feedback seems like such a fundamental and fascinating question. How do you select the humans?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, how do you select the humans?
AI alignment, right? Which everybody is like, oh, that sounds great. Alignment with what? Human values. whose human values?
Whose human
Right. And
values.
so
Naturally, this week people started piling on with more questions. When they asked, Gemini apparently couldn't say which was worse for society, Elon Musk tweeting memes or Hitler.
And like one of the ways that these models improve is through reinforcement learning from human feedback, and this would be a way for the human feedback to be made more trustworthy also.
How do you select the humans?
Yeah, exactly.
Can we trust one company with a backdoor on AGI? I don't think so. I think we need to replicate what happens in the real world. Social discourse, expertise evaluation, open debate. That's the agent graph. And so what's exciting about the protocol is that it's not just about doing this like more ethical but inferior version of AI. It's like, how can decentralization lead to 100x in intelligence? And so we saw a superpower here with decentralization. And that superpower is the ability for AI infrastructures to coordinate, to cohere, to reinforce on a peer-to-peer basis in a way that centralized AI labs cannot do. So you can do it at the open source level, but you can do it also at the weights level, at the parameter level, at the feedback level. And so when you have intermodal communication, you can get experience transfer. So intelligence is about trying things and getting feedback. Each loop increases intelligence. And so what if all the models could learn from one another? Instead of having a top-down structure where you have the model and the users and the data scientists, you could scale horizontally by saying all the models can add to the intelligence of the entire network. And so this experience transfer is like, imagine if you were able to download into your brain all the experience and all the feedback of all the other humans in real time. All those experiences would become part of your memory, of your knowledge. With experience transfer, when one model learns something, all the other models can learn from it. When you give a feedback, it doesn't just go to OpenAI or Anthropic or Gemini, but it is shared across all the models. And because you have ownership, you can monetize it.
As a subnet concept.
Yeah, well, monetizing.
Is that right?
Yeah. Well, monetizing the improvement of a machine learning model directly at the level of the weights would be the basis for a training mechanism. Therefore, producing gradients on your machine learning model that improve it against a loss. So you can have these like long-term Kaggle competition-like situations where people are out there, they take the model state, they try to come up with an adaptation to that model that improves it against a very large data set. And we have like this collective Kaggle collaborative machine learning training process that happens. And I think that could really change the field by allowing researchers to come and train really large scale models and open us up to be the producers of best-in-class systems in a completely unique way. That's really exciting for me.
And so to protocolize this experience transfer, we need a standardized coordination substrate. Newcoin is the agent graph protocol. Each iteration gets recorded on a graph, shaping a new kind of data set for RLHF, but also for sharing parameters between machine learning pipelines in a trusted way. And so the challenge when you have this open decentralized system is trust, because if it's centralized, you can trust the team that's working on that layer of the stack to coordinate with the other team. But how do you do that remotely with people you don't know, with this like permissionless, ecosystem? How do you share parameters securely? And so for that, we have cryptographic signatures and reputation based on standardized value dynamics. Value dynamics are everywhere. They are all around us.
Like, what is the source that is open? You know what I mean? Like, there's basically, it's a giant CSV file.
Yeah.
With a bunch of numbers.
Yep.
We use values, we use numbers to guide innovation, cultural evolution, knowledge. We use value dynamics for that. We review things, we give our feedback. There is a measure of what is right and how often someone is right. And measuring intelligence is the success rate at providing good responses.
Google's basic idea is we're going to work out which pages are important on the web by looking at how many links they get. If other people link to a page, they put a hyperlink from their page to your page, they went to the trouble of doing that presumably because they think your page is good somehow. They think it's useful or interesting. Other people should have a look at it. So if lots and lots of people have linked to your page, that's a sign that's important. But you can do a more sophisticated version of that idea by using this PageRank thing. We don't just say, oh, you get 1 point for each link. We now say you get some number of points that depends on how important the people who are linking to you. And how do we work out how important they are? Well, it's how many people link to them and so forth.
At the high level, you have identity, where you have, as a human, you have your degrees, your qualifications, your honors, your prizes, like all the things that constitute your identity. And for AI, you have benchmarks. Then when you go down to the output level, there is also a measurement of that output. For humans, it's the marks in academia. So you go to school, you get marks, and that helps you guide your learning process. You know that you are learning in the right direction. But it's also your likes on social media. We guide innovation and cultural evolution through how we give feedback to one another between humans. Your GitHub stars, your citations. You know, when you have a paper and you get cited by another paper, that constitutes some kind of metric, some kind of measure. And so for machines, you have performance metrics that guide the learning process, like loss function, precision recall, F1 scores, all those attributes that we give and all those numbers that we give the model to help it learn, to help it progress. And then when you go down to the very microscopic level, when you go down to this cognitive layer, if we could measure the neurochemistry of the brain, we would also be able to count. And that's what neuroscientists are working on. And so you have synaptic firings, neurochemical responses, the degree of each chemical, the intensity of this electromagnetic field flowing in the brain. For machines, it's much easier to measure because it's all mathematical. So you have things like vector embeddings, feature maps, all those numbers that are not about measuring, but that are about supporting that prediction. And so if you take all those numbers and you put them all on a graph and you make it standard and open and you give control to the agents, to the models, to the humans to decide who to share it with, now you're going very deep into the identity stack, the machine learning stack, and the crypto stack. Because you can start creating the kind of value dynamics, the kind of database, the kind of interactions that help amplify this intelligence on a peer-to-peer basis. All those numbers right now are scattered across systems, and now it's time to make them work together. Normalized value mapping is the field of giving weights to those values across systems and make them cohere, make them coordinate, make them useful on a peer-to-peer basis. And so if you have one model that can share 1 million experiences with 1 million models, you have now 1 trillion experiences, because now each model is taking a different approach, but it still benefits from that experience. And Newcoin is a public good protocol that gives control and ownership to the users over their value dynamics. Each identity, each agent is assigned contextual values based on performance metrics. If a human or an AI has given a lot of good responses about tokenomics, maybe the inputs of that agent and their feedback about tokenomics should matter more. It should influence more the way the model is being built.
Well, look, ultimately, someone's going to crack the nut that your skill set has value, your accomplishments have value, your expertise has value, and
your on-chain activity has value.
Yeah, your on-chain activity has value. And my big thing is like Twitter, right? If I like a tweet and it's on nutrition, it has no value. There's no value in me liking that tweet because I have no expertise in nutrition. It's just my personal opinion. If I like a tweet on asset allocation, I would like to think I might be adding some value there. And so, but yet every like is the same, right? Every user is the same. It's like jobs, right? We count jobs by job. Well, an IBM executive making $200,000 a year is different than a barista. It just is. It doesn't. I'm not saying it's good or bad. But they're different, and they have different impact on the economy. And yet we look at the jobs number and we just count the number of jobs. No, there's a quality level of jobs. There's a quality to a like. There's a quality to a participant in a network. There's a quality to expertise or guild membership.
For that layer of human reinforcement, if someone's going to tell the AI that's true, that's not true, then they can sign that. They can say, I, with my identity, attest to that feedback that I gave this AI.
You've maybe seen the news stories of some of the large language models or ChatGPT where its results are decaying over time.
Yep, absolutely. And so preserving the quality of that signal is going to be deeply tied to reputational systems so that the AI takes more into account certain feedback. I think that's also going to be part of that solution.
Yeah, and so that's the foundation of the whole system. Humans, machines turn interaction histories into social capital, into weights. those weights add nuance. RLHF today, it's like one person, one vote. Imagine one person, 7,000 votes, because you have a strong track record in that domain. So now you can have a much more nuanced, you have much more intelligence across the network. We use value dynamics on humans to ground the value maps, and that's only through a decentralized, standardized system that you can achieve that. Newcoin is the ERC20 of intelligence and the Uniswap of intelligence. You can have this peer-to-peer liquidity across the network to foster the rails for building this decentralized AGI. So to summarize, to get general intelligence, you need general function approximation, which requires standardized value dynamics for this coordination across modalities, which requires a network protocol. And so to have a network protocol, you need active participation. And so to have that participation, you need incentives. And crypto networks are very good at that. To align the incentives, you need a consensus mechanism. And for that consensus mechanism to be secure, you need identity proxies. You need anonymous identifiers that measure personhood, skills, organic intelligence, and all of that.
This is an area that the Web3 industry is actively working on, creating privacy-preserving, decentralized identities.
Bitcoin does identity through electricity. WorldCoin is using biometrics. Filecoin is using storage. Newcoin is using human value dynamics and feedback.
How do you select the humans?
Exactly.
And so now you have that recursion. Now you have that path that is much more likely to take us to AGI. When you have a fully open source, transparent, open public discourse, public debate with expertise evaluation, now you can start having something that looks like society but on steroids. And so society is not perfect, obviously. We have a lot of inefficiencies. Actually, we can use AI to fix those inefficiencies. Today, if you look at the way PhDs are distributed, it's the best approach we have found so far to evaluate advanced knowledge and expertise, but it can be improved. We can have micro PhDs on so many layers, so many levels. We can make it much more granular and sophisticated and dynamic and efficient. We can drive tremendous economic growth through that efficiency of intelligence allocation, not just for machines, also for humans. We are creating this feedback loop where we get more and more clarity about who has the proficiency to execute a certain task, a certain mission.
DeFi summer took off because of yield farming, where people wanted to attract liquidity to their platform. Now there's a much bigger push towards labor. Yeah, we don't really want this mercenary liquidity where we give you a bunch of our tokens, then you just dump it on the open market. That was good for a while, but it didn't ultimately work. Now what we want is people actually contributing. Because of the ways that DAOs are structured today, what do they do? We're seeing calls for a more professional class of delegates, right? And you also need skilled labor. The problem with labor is it's not fungible like capital is. Someone needs to underwrite that labor. And I think what you're ultimately going to see is either DAOs or these big associations of people who do this sort of thing. I think you're going to see that in crypto, and they're going to wield actually an enormous amount of power. And there's going to be a balance between labor and capital that exists in more traditional markets between unions and people who own and manage companies and equity. And I think that same dynamic's going to crop up in crypto.
That bodes really well for the current labor structure and what people don't want to go back to traditional work and working from home. Right. And certainly Web3 open source systems really enable that.
Transfers labor into capital, which is as follows: is somebody sits down at a keyboard and types a bunch of stuff in, and a capital asset comes out the other side, and then somebody buys that capital asset for $1 billion.
Actually, which is very common in life, the highest pro is also the highest con in that it's more bodies at play. So at one hand, you have a ton of people that you coordinate and incentivize correctly, you can get a shit done. But on the other hand, it's really difficult and time consuming to keep everybody in a row and also motivated. So in terms of requests for startups, there's actually one thing that's top of mind for me these days, and it's proof of credentials. So the idea is that there's a ton of data that's currently being generated on chain, and it's not being leveraged at all. And I think that in the future, we're gonna see credentials become extremely modular. And as we move towards pseudonymity, you're gonna be able to say okay, I am a Rust genius and prove that via your GitHub commits, and then leverage that to get a job at a DAO. And then you wouldn't be able to, or wouldn't be forced to expose everything about yourself. You could just pick and choose exactly what you want about yourself, because if you think about identity, and not to go on a total rant, but if you think about identity, it's changed a lot. And in the physical world, you kind of are tied to one, and as we've moved online, we've kind of moved to the other spectrum where everyone's anonymous and ranting at people on Reddit for God knows what. But we're gonna find this middle ground, or at least really explore the spectrum there and be able to pull from our physical identity and our history and our past experiences and prove things. And this is extremely important for DAOs because that's the only way you're going to be able to pick talent. So I would say that's the top thing I'm looking for. If anyone's building it, reach out.
I think the most likely path to AGI is the decentralized path. Because when we talk about general intelligence, general function approximation across modalities, for it to be general, we need that intermodality communication. And so to get there, you can build this vertical, general purpose, almighty model that will be best at everything. And there is a case for that, actually. But there is another approach, the modular approach. So imagine an ever-expanding network of models and agents that share their parameters and can scale horizontally. And so I find this path much more likely because that's the story of the internet.
Internally, we have stronger models that are in between 3.5 and 4 that are basically the second or third best model in the world. So really, we think that the gap is closing. The gap is approximately 6 months at that point. And the reason why it's 6 months is that it actually goes faster if you do open source things, because you get the community modify the model to suggest very good ideas that can then be consolidated by us, for instance, and we just go faster because of that. So it has always been the case that open source ends up going faster, and that's the reason why the entire internet runs on Linux.
What made the iPhone successful is the diversity of applications, the fault tolerance that you get with horizontal scaling. Like you can have 100 teams trying something, and if one wins, the network wins. And so you can propagate the weights of all those AI models and create a network that will achieve much higher intelligence than a centralized company. Actually, the same is true about Google. They use the web to curate the web by running that PageRank algorithm. And so Newcoin is the PageRank for agents, an agent graph aggregating the history of feedback. But unlike Google, Newcoin is a public good. Anyone can own it, build on it, with or without the token. It's all open source, and each node in the network can add value to the other nodes. Imagine the power of a network of 1 million agents communicating, evaluating, and reinforcing one another based on how well they perform. That's much more likely to succeed, especially at the pace at which innovation is happening now. Now transformers are becoming smarter. They are able to give feedback, which means you can do RLHF on top of RLHF. This can be done through a decentralized network. Now you have 500,000 open source models on Hugging Face. And so this lab in Tokyo called Sakana was able to effectively produce new foundation models at a fraction of the cost by using this evolutionary merge where they would take the best features of each open source model and combine them together. And so the reason why I'm so bullish about decentralized AI is that if you combine the trust of cryptographic signatures with the power of data coordination and these value dynamics, you can start building a completely new foundation, not just for the internet, but for society, for the economy, for knowledge. And we are just getting started. Let's build this.
Across the networks where thoughts converge, synergistic intelligence begins to surge. Agents connect in a dance of fate. Newcoin orchestrates, opens the gate. Synergy in every link, thoughts interlace. Newcoin grabs the cognitive space. We've never known a stronger tide. Intelligence shared under the digital sky. Teledynamics shape the paths we roam. Natural systems exist.